Good morning and welcome to Saturday special of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Human beings are strange and their choice of heroes is always biased, and many times it is perfect, but so many times it is biased. What's more unfortunate is they pick and choose according to the norms rather than the merits and demerits of the case. The people who have studied the epics, Ramayana, Mahabharata, or even the Puranas would understand what I'm meaning. Sita has been deified and rightly so. But Draupadi also, again, people know about her. How many people revere people like Urmila, Mandodari, and how many people really like the character of Kakai or Surpanakha? A queen portrayed as a wicked woman, and her complexity as a warrior and healer erased. In the case of Kakai, she was a great healer. She was a great warrior. She saved her husband. And yet, she is only criticized for asking her husband to fulfill the promise. That's it. And which mother doesn't do it, given a chance? And as a matter of fact, she was talking to her husband. She never told Ram to go away, and Dasharatha never told Ram to go away. Look at another woman, Urmila, a sister of Sita, wife of Lakshmana, abandoned. If Sita could accompany Rama, why could Urmila not accompany? But then Lakshmana took a stand. Well, you look here and serve my parents. Shouldn't Sita have done it? And was the sacrifice of Urmila in any way inferior to that of anybody else? There are many women in Indian history and mythology whose existence has either been effaced or diminished. One of the most neglected characters in Ramayana is Urmila. And that's very unfortunate because that differentiates. And it's her private exile. As a matter of fact, there are so many unsung women that you barely know of. Their pain and their misery, their disappointments, their loves, their victories, their power, their loss. Do you see them as persons or just populating the narrative? If that's so, it's chiefly because, now this is a problem, we see the mythology through men's eye. It's rarely from the women's perspective we see it, and women also, when they see that, view it through their husbands, fathers, sons' eyes, never on their own. For example, Menaka, famous Apsara, but what do you know of her? Then Surpanakha is a stereotype of villain, but never seen as a woman. She is neither a vamp nor a victim. She is just a person. And in Mahabharata, you talk of Draupadi, but much better character, Satyavati, is ignored, is unrecognized. And in the whole of Mahabharata, she was the most strong-willed woman and perhaps the most political one, the most powerful person in epic who was largely responsible for the later events that unfolded. And yet, how many people talk of Satyavati in a positive manner? Are they even aware of that? Each of the women were a challenge. And the beauty is that the shades of grey that mark them are turned into black. There are no 50 shades of grey, no. They are just black and white. Now, if you talk of that, about the women, you have a need to understand that they don't have to wait for a knight in armor to rescue them from their troubles. No. They bear testament to the fact that we carry everything we need to survive, the ordeal and our problems. We use our heads, our hearts and hands. It's a beautiful truth. But let me tell you, this ignoring are just tarring them black. Now, Srupnakha, when she said that I love you, what was wrong in that? It was an expression of her frank emotion. And you could easily have said, sorry, we don't love you. But then cutting the nose was something absolutely not acceptable. Amba, another woman who has been ignored, was pretty voiceless, except when she decides to commit suicide. And she's reborn as a warrior. And she intrigued me. Why did she want to do that? What was she feeling? What must have led her to the steps she had to take? There is an old saying that you should not keep Mahabharata at home. The epic encodes violent moments in our collective history. And if we look at the Mahabharata closely, none of the main characters are flawless. And it's this shade of grey that adds to the importance. However, over the last millennia and a half, the grey has been slowly erased, which was a very positive thing. But what has emerged is either pristine white or dark, abysmal black. Some figures have been deified and their wrongs have been condoned. As a matter of fact, there has been a reinforced collective silencing of Subhadra's story. And that's more important rather than wrong Draupadi's or Sita's. Last time I talked that Draupadi and Sita are great because Sita was possibly the first single mother and Draupadi started Me Too movement. But Subhadra's painful story of abduction in Mahabharata remains buried. And why so? We have a nationalistic glorification of Arjuna and Abhimanyu over time. And that needed the story not to be told. Generations of authors have glossed over a significant act of violence by their heroes, without which Mahabharata in its composed form would not have been possible. Subhadra's voice has been silenced and all the wrongdoings against her have been either disregarded or even worse, they have been romanticized. Now, Subhadra's story in Mahabharata is different than what you see on Doordarshan, where you see Arjuna and Krishna are absolutely flawless, which is not. The original story of abduction of Subhadra episode in Mahabharata is very brief. It begins with Arjuna's coming to Dwarka during a festival and seeing Subhadra. His desires are awakened, Kandrapa Samjayata, and he asks her brother Krishna about her. Krishna replies that Swambar is the acceptable form of marriage for Kshatriyas. However, marriage of abduction is also a possibility for Arjuna because he is not sure whether Subhadra would select Arjuna in the Swambar or not. So, Krishna's approval and Arjuna abducts Subhadra. Now the word used here is very appropriate, you've got to understand. It's aropet, which is strangely the same word which Valmiki has used to describe the abduction of Sita. And in all of this we know nothing about Subhadra's consent. Did she want it? Or whom she would have chosen in Swambar had the decision been left to her? And now, look at it. Her elder brother is enraged when he learns of the abduction, but Krishna pacifies him. Now, what has happened is, with the passage of time, the divine cult of Krishna became much bigger than other Brahminical gods. So there was a need to revise myths, including that of Subhadra's abduction. Many devotees would have found it very difficult to entertain the possibility that their god sanctioned the abduction of his own sister. So the composers of Bhagavad Puran had the twofold task. They created a sense of consent and shifted the blame somewhere else. So how did they do it? In the first, sense of consent, they obliterated any mention of Swayamvar, which was there to be there, and insinuated that Subhadra and Arjuna reciprocated each other's desires. The second task required a bigger build-up. They introduced a subplot that is not mentioned anywhere in Mahabharata. They said that Balaram had chosen Duryodhana as Subhadra's groom without taking her consent. So they convincingly shifted Krishna's laps onto Balaram and made abduction look like a better alternative. Now, as the Bhagavad Puran began to be widely circulated, this new story of Subhadra and Arjuna replaced the old real story. The Lysaeus authors were too uneasy with her abduction, so created an elaborate ornate romance. If you look at Cassius Verma's 10th century Subhadra Dhananjay, he wrote in the 10th century, 1000 years back. And then Dhananjay takes away the burden of abduction from Arjuna and dumps it on Duryodhana, who apparently sent a cloud demon to abduct Subhadra. Arjuna saves her, but doesn't know who she is. So a comedy of error follows. Subhadra, who is in love with Arjuna, is conflicted when she falls in love with her savior, who is also Arjuna. But she doesn't know he is Arjuna. She is just her. And then she falls in love with an ascetic, because Arjuna was in Gupt. For 1 year he had to remain hidden. So this ascetic is also Arjuna. So Subhadra first falls in Arjuna in dreams, then with a savior, and then with the ascetic. Arjuna falls in love with the woman he saved and also finds himself in conflict about his prior love for Subhadra. So the play ends with a resolution of this absurd conflict. The premise of abduction is replicated and made so comic that one begins to disbelieve the earlier violence of the act. Now, regional authors have come up with the centers of Vaishnavism, and they took their cue from Bhagavad Puran. In Telugu, we come across Talpata Tirilium's 15th century Subhadram Kalyanam. And in Odia, we find a sizable yarn on their imams. Upendar Bhanja's Subhadra Parnai plays with an abduction followed by the savior. And it also finds a way to hint at Krishna's blinking at it. Now, it is Krishna's wife Satyabhama who is abducted by Gau Singh, and it is her that Arjuna saves. And seeing this veiler, Subhadra gives her heart to him. Now, this is inversing desire. When Mahabharata acquired a national status in the colonial times, Abhimanyu and Arjuna were reinvented as national heroes. And then what happened? It meant that Subhadra episode had to appear harmless. No abduction. So this was achieved by crafting ascetic Arjuna as the object of Subhadra's desire, instant infatuation coupled with comic tantrums and threat to suicide were used to define a story. Then in 1852, Tara Charan Shikdar's Bengali Bhadr Arjun. Then in 1945 came Marathi Sanyas Ke Lagna. So it shows that she was following and pursuing Arjun. She was flouting the restraint imposed by Balaram on her. And this makes one wonder about the futility of men giving women a voice after obliterating her ability to select her own decision, in this case Swayamvar. So this was basically again a patriarchal attitude And this created an unease. They wanted to erase the act of violence by kidnapping. Ravi Verma's iconic painting, when I saw, where Subhadra looks away hesitantly as persistent Arjuna tugs at her hand. Now, abduction and her brother's violation of consent remain the central themes. And what to do? You can't make this woman a heroine. No sympathy can be wasted on Subhadra. So the problem begins. And so when instead of questioning the epic heroes, we start questioning the act of abduction itself. Did Subhadra license it? Why didn't she scream? Maybe the hero is justified because it was done by a hero. And you see, unfortunately, in our society, epics are used to contain moral ethos. One can see the danger of such thinking. So what we need is retelling the story of Subhadra. But are we ready for it? This is a million-dollar question that we face. And if I look at it in a dispassionate manner, it is shocking. For the simple reason, Draupadi is forced to be the wife of her husband and thus demonized. Sita is forced to be a single mother but is deified. Subhadra, a human being, is just treated as an extra in the drama of Mahabharata. But in reality, Subhadra's action was a real human action and it should be taken as such. The affair of Arjuna and Subhadra should have got more prominence. Similarly, now coming to Surupnaka, she was a real woman. So was Kakain. But the paternalistic society and the patriarchal system did not want strong women. And the heroine had to be demure, submissive, accepting of the order. And if one was determined to be bold, then she has to be cast as Draupadi having 5 husbands. Which she had to do it because of Kunti's desire. So all this lends a certain moral ambiguity. But one thing is definite, that these so-called castaways, these women, have a much stronger right to be deemed as characters in their own right, without in any way infringing the ethos and dignity of the epics. But just ignoring them is doing an act of injustice, and that must not be done. Thank you.